Well, good day. It is a great day to be alive because it is July the 15th, 2025. And I hope wherever you are, whenever you're listening to these videos, you're having a great day. My name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome you to Search for Signs. I also would like to do two things before I get going. First, I just want to encourage anybody who wants to know more about this information that the best thing to do is to do some research and look into this information for yourself. Check out some information on some of the websites that I've provided links for in the description portion of these videos to get really good background information about what I talk about here. If you check out the Share International site, link is at the very top. I do believe you can get the best background information there than you can anywhere else. If you, the other thing I want to talk about is, and encourage you to do, if you want to come back and join the discussion, post a comment. Let me know what you think. If you have a question you want to ask, post your question in the comment section. If you want to talk to me about something related to this information and what I talk about here, email me, searchforsigns@mail.com. Okie dokie. So I had some really good comments that came my way and a couple questions that I can't tell if they're rhetorical and they really don't want me to try to answer it. They're just asking it to ask it, or if they really want me to try to tackle and answer the question. But what the heck, I'm going to try to tackle it. So the first comment is, okay, so here it goes. Maitreya's obviously made enough videos by Gary Willing and the late Benjamin Creme. All people need to be is more cheerful and make a space for Maitreya's interview. Well, I wish it was that simple. Clearly, you're telling me I'm putting up too many videos. Maybe this is just your polite way of doing it. But if you listen to this other question that somebody asked me, what is this channel about? Well, clearly all the channels I've been putting up, I haven't really clearly explained that. Now, if I had to give a background information every single time I put a video up, because I put up a lot of videos, it would get kind of old after a while. So I typically just encourage you to get some information for yourself if you're interested in background information. Rather than me telling you about it over and over and over again, go to the Share International site, get some information that way, and then you can really see what this information is about, really. And if you don't, you don't, right? But if you want to see if it's true for you, that's the best way to do it, really, to be honest. My intention originally with these videos was to talk about my own experiences with Maitreya, talk about the many miracle signs. That's when I came up with the name Search for Signs. And when I put the videos up, eventually somebody commented somewhere. I remember the first comment was not very flattering, for sure. But it encouraged me to keep putting up more videos because, I mean, heck, somebody heard it somewhere and they found the channel some kind of way. So I went ahead and put up some more videos, and then somebody asked me a question, and it kind of snowballed from there. And then, now I talk more about what's going on in the world in relation to this story than I do my own personal experiences. But I talk about them to kind of give a little bit of credibility to what I'm saying. And I only say a little bit because you don't know me. You don't know if I'm telling you the truth. You don't know what I'm hiding or whatever like that. So I just put it out there for you to look at, for you to consider, and leave it up to you, right? But really, I would say if I had to pose a question about what I talk about to help get us to think about it is, what would you say if I told you that the Christ had already returned? What would you say? Would you say I was crazy? Probably. Would you believe it? Probably not. But what if I told you I had enough personal experiences with myself to believe for me that it's true? And what if I told you that there was evidence that the teacher was already here? There were miracle signs that were happening to every single religious group without exception. And they were giving people hope. And people who didn't practice a religion such as myself were having their own personal miraculous experiences. And what if I told you that that teacher long ago had predicted that humanity would start to wake up and the voice of the people would start to march in the streets for change all over the world, and it would get to be more and more of a powerful voice that would stand for change, that the people were ahead of their own politicians, and we know better for what we need than they do. And you're starting to see it more and more and more. And what if I told you that not only is the Christ back in the world, but if you're a Muslim, the Imam Mahdi's already here? And what if I told you that if you're Jewish, the Messiah is back? And what if I told you if you're a Hindu, that Sri Krishna or the Kalki Avatar is here? And what if I told you that if you're a Buddhist, that Maitreya Buddha is already here? Would you believe me? It doesn't really matter what you believe. It's what I think to be true. And that's why I'm saying this to you, right? So that's what this channel is about. It's about, what does it mean for humanity that the teacher is already here? Is it what the Christians are expecting? It means the end of the world? Is it what the the Buddhists think. I mean, they're all, from what I understand, talking about the same teacher. They just are expecting him by different names. And then the other question I would say is, what if he was already talking to us on our television, or in the media, some kind of way? And the reason why nobody's talking about this wonderful teacher back in the world yet is because he's not claiming to be Maitreya. He's only claiming to be an ordinary person. And then the other question would be is, why is he doing that? Well, he's doing that because he wants you to hear what he has to say and be able to honestly answer for yourself. Do I agree with, or do I see what he's saying is true or not? Do I agree with it or not? And be able to be totally free to decide for yourself what you think is true. But Maitreya will do exactly what was predicted in Revelations that would happen. That he will build, all the symbols that John put in there that people think mean the end of the world are the exact opposite of the end of the world. They mean that the future we have a future. What I'm saying? The world's not going to end. And then what the Buddha predicted Buddha would do, which is inspire and galvanize humanity to build a brilliant golden civilization based on righteousness and truth. That righteousness and truth is the divinity within all our hearts. How is he going to do that? How can we do that when we have institutions and structures that support the rich at the expense of the many? How can we do that when economically half the world is living in poverty and millions upon millions of people are literally starving to death? How can he do that when we have this world with all the war that we have, and the injustice, and the crime, and all the disease, and the environment that's killing us all off because we're poisoning the environment and so forth? Well, how are we going to solve these problems? Maitreya is just going to show us that it's very, very simple what we can do. And it's going to take some steps first. The first step is we have to share the resources of the world. Countries have to learn how to share with others. And then the next thing is, how do we solve the environmental problem? Well, now that we're cooperating a little bit more with one another, now we can solve the environmental problem, but we can't do it when we're competing against one another. So then if you look at individually, right? Like, close your eyes if you're listening to this video and you want to participate in this exercise and you're not driving. So let me just say that. Close your eyes and imagine what your future is like, and imagine what the world is about. Is it a hopeful future? Are you inspired about the future that awaits you? Or are you a little bit more concerned or outright scared about the future? Well, you're only scared about the future because everyone's telling you that it's going to be worse than it is today. That's all everybody's talking about. Nobody's talking about hope out there. But if you do some research and you search for the signs and you see the marches in the world, but you also see the UFOs going on and you see UFOs about that, or you see images of weeping icons or videos of the Hindu milk miracle, or people talking about being saved from an accident from an angel or something like that, it might give you a sense of hope. And then when you realize that it's happening all over the world, to all walks of life, to people of all sorts of different religions, then it's true to say the hope for mankind is for all of mankind, because that is the truth. And there's a tremendous amount of hope out there. And then if you look at the future, right? So one of the things that really concerns people today naturally is AI and automation. Why does it concern us? Because we are all competing against one another. We all don't trust one another. We all think that everyone is out to get us, of course, because that's what we've seen. That's been our experience in our life, right? And then here comes this technology that they're talking about putting everybody out of work. Now what? I mean, there's no country is helping anybody out, really. Nobody's going to feed us and keep us fed if we don't have work. So then what? What do we do, right? Well, what if there was a way that we could make sure that every person on this planet has food, clothing, shelter, and health and education as a human right? What if that became the priority and not war? What if that became the priority and not billions of dollars of subsidies and bailouts for corporations around the world and so forth? What if we actually took care of the people instead of the billionaires out there, right? What if we did? What if nations shared and we started to trust one another? Well, then AI would be something that might be beneficial for us. Maybe that will free us up to where we can discover our own divinity. And then maybe if we're starting to discover our own divinity, we'll see that other people are doing that too. They're exploring divinity within themselves as well. And that even though that they have a different experience than we have, they have a different look of their skin than we do, They're all going through the same experience, and maybe we'll be able to appreciate and accept them more. And then we start to manifest a little bit of love on this planet, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So maybe, possibly, the future that we are awaiting is not, at the very least, more of the same, or at the very worst, an end. So that's where this channel, that's the other thing that this channel is about, is that maybe there's a little bit of hope out there for everybody. I think there's a lot of hope out there. All right, well, thank you very much for the question, and hopefully that answers that. But at the end of the day, if you wanted to have some better background information about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, go to the Share International site, look at it, read some more information about it. Okie dokie. So I had some comments from two different people that are based on what I said in the last video. I'm going to read the first one, and then I'll try to touch on the next one. Marion had asked me a question about some pundits that she had been listening to, and she asked me my opinion about whether I thought they were influenced by Maitreya or not. And I tried to answer it. I thought I did, and this is what she had to say, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it to have a better understanding of where I was coming from. So thank you so much, Gary, for this quick and detailed answer to my question. I agree with you in many points, yet there are some thoughts I'd like to share. Yes, I agree there might not be much of a solution for many problems talked about by so-called diplomats. But first there is truth, then there is communication about it. Diplomacy could be one step in the right direction. For some politicians, it might be just about to negotiate instead of dropping a bomb. Acting out emotionally is the worst thing at all, I think. As far as I understand Maitreya's teaching in the book The Art of Cooperation by Benjamin Creme, there will be more communication than competition in the new age. But first, there should be the analysis of the problem and the listening to it. Then the consensus, I think that's the word, or cooperation could take place. Yes, there might be ego or lower consciousness with some people, but what about us? Aren't Maitreya and the other masters accepting us like we are, yet working with us and leading us to further evolvement? Truth as such seemed to be a precious thing to me. It's far more better than illusions. And yes, the biggest truth, the biggest solution would be and shall be the principle of sharing, as to Maitreya's teachings. But should one preach it to people who do not have the consciousness yet? Maybe yes, maybe no. We are all different. We should act accordingly to our conscience and our heart. And we have so many things to learn. Thanks for the opportunity to share and discuss such things. Many greetings from Marion. Well, thank you for sharing, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share and discuss such things for sure. In terms of the principle of sharing, okay, before I talk about the pundits, you said, but should one preach it to people who do not yet have the consciousness yet? I don't think personally you should preach anything to anybody about anything, to be honest. Now, I do think that this generation, and I mean everybody alive today in the world, when you talk about the principle of sharing, will have an understanding of what you're talking about. Doesn't mean they'll believe it, and it doesn't mean they'll laugh at you, and say that you're stupid for thinking that. But they will at least have an understanding of it. But you don't know how they will react until you say anything. And then you don't know, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. I'm just saying this for anybody. But we all don't know how somebody will respond, and we also don't know if they respond to it negatively now, they won't turn around and understand it more once Maitreya talks about it. Because, I talk about Maitreya and him inspiring us to do all these wonderful things, but I do think, and there's not a lot of evidence that would prove me wrong in this case, but I think that when Maitreya is out known for who he is, and or is at least suspected to be Maitreya, and then we ask him to speak to us, and he comes and speaks to all of humanity on the Day of Declaration, that corruption in government will still be there. There'll still be hunger. There'll still be the environmental problem. There'll still be war. There'll still be terrorism. There'll still be all these problems that are still waiting for us will still be there. But the day after, and the day after that, we'll have a better understanding of what to do. And then we'll also look to Maitreya. What do we do now? You know what I'm saying? How do we implement the principle of sharing, right? We haven't even really talked about that on this channel. And there'll be many ideas put forth. And there's already a plan by the masters that is the best plan, which involves the United Nations and so forth. But, will we try it? Will we not? It won't be until Maitreya shows us just how necessary sharing is until we do it. But It doesn't mean that we can't start talking about it now. It doesn't mean we can't start helping to lay the groundwork for people to understand what Maitreya is talking about. But I also disagree with the fact that they don't have the consciousness for it yet. I don't agree with that at all. And maybe that's what you weren't trying to say, but people think like that, so that's why I'm saying it. Now, in terms of the pundits that you were talking about, you asked me specifically what if I thought they were being influenced by Maitreya. You didn't say anything about if I thought what they were doing was good work, or if I thought they should stop doing what they're doing, or whatever. Because there's nothing wrong with addressing the problems of the world unless you bring in fear, and then it is quite destructive, because now you're creating a situation where people now become more fearful on their own. It's infectious to them, which people do all the time about stuff when they're looking at the problems. They see the problems very clearly, they talk about it with fear, and they create fear in somebody else. If you see the problems, address the problems, and speak about it through joy and hope, well, then you're addressing the problems, but you're not creating the problem of fear, right? So I'm not saying that Jeffrey Sachs and Colonel McGregor did that, but people do that. Now, the other thing is, to be honest, I didn't know enough about them to really talk about them. I kind of pivoted and started talking more about the people that I listen to. And I can't remember if I mentioned them or not in that video, but I listen to the Young Turks channel all the time. Doesn't mean I agree with everything that they say, but I listen to it all the time. I get my news from them a lot of times. Very left-wing, very progressive. They see clearly the problems in the United States. They see clearly the political problems. They see clearly the environmental problems. They see clearly the problem going on in the genocide in Palestine. They see clearly the war in Iraq, and they talk about it all the time, but they've never once said anything about how to solve the problem, which is sharing. They haven't. Doesn't mean they're not doing great work. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean they should stop doing what they're doing. It just means they are not talking about the solutions, right? Now, Ben's Master said something years ago in one of his articles. He said that when you can listen and you can hear from people, in the media, I guess, or politicians or whatever, and even in music, he said, you can hear unity. If you just listen to it close enough, you can hear what they're saying, right? You can hear some of the priorities of the teacher and some of the things that these politicians are saying, because they are being inspired by Maitreya. And I know for myself, just in terms of music, there are some musicians that I listen to that when I listen to them, I actually have an experience of unity. I don't know why, but I do. Are they being inspired by one of these masters? Maybe. And then I also listen to artists, and I'm just going to throw out a very popular name that I think everybody knows, Taylor Swift. Fine artist, love her music, very entertaining. I don't get that same impression from her. It doesn't mean she's a bad musician. Doesn't mean she's a bad person. Doesn't mean she should stop playing music. It just means that I'm not getting that same impression from her. Now, the only politician that I've really heard in recent history that has ever even started to talk anything about, and I'm only talking about American politics, some of the priorities of Maitreya would be Bernie Sanders. I'm sure there are others, but I haven't really heard them. And then if you look at all the presidents in the last 25 years or 30 years, from Clinton to Trump, the only president that really did anything that took a step toward any of the priorities of Maitreya, and it was just healthcare, was Obama. He didn't talk about sharing. He didn't do anything to bring about the principle of sharing, but he did try to institute and pass a law for universal health care. He tried. It didn't work, but he tried. And then he had to come up with the second best option, which was Obamacare, which is, but he at least tried to do it. But if you listen to the Republican politicians, anytime they talk about health care, that's evil. It's socialism, communism, and that's the worst thing that could ever, even though they have socialized health care and it's great for them and their families, they don't want it for us, right? But he was the only one to do it. So, and then the question would be, some of these pundits that are on TV that perhaps are inspired by Maitreya, or at least have the idea of unity or hope in that way, are they being told not to talk about it? Or they stop talking about it because they're afraid of being ridiculed or something? And does it have to do with commercialization? I mean, Ben's Master talked about commercialization and market forces was like a monster with its hand on the grip of the throat of humanity, squeezing out the life force of humanity, squeezing out any what did he say? Creative thought or generous notion. So are they wanting to talk about it and somebody's telling them not to? Are there politicians on both sides of the aisle that are wanting to talk about unity in some way, but their party is telling them not to? Are there donors telling them not to talk about it? And I'm sure, right? But at some point, if and you have to cross the desert to hear it, right? You can hear people talking about unity in their own way. You can hear people talking about the solutions, and that's really what I was talking about. Everybody can talk about the problems, and everybody's very clear on the problems, but nobody's talking about the solution. And Ben's master would say the solution is sharing. There is no other way to the future for humanity. It is sharing. That is it. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's wise for all of us that believe this information on whatever level to start talking about it with those people when people bring the problems to us and they say, oh, all this is going on in the world. There's war, there's this, there's genocide, there's hunger, there's crime, there's, blah, 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 blah. Talk about the principle of sharing. Study up on it. Learn from it. Go read about the Marshall Plan. Go to the Share International site and hear Ben talk about the principle of sharing. Read some of the articles from Benjamin Crumb's master about the principle of sharing to help give you more information to talk about it. They might not believe it right away, but you might make inroads with them that you don't realize. And that's why I suggested what I suggested. Does that add a little bit more light to it? But if you don't want to talk about it with people, don't talk about it with people, like you said. So anyway, hopefully that helps. Now, moving on. Robert Vasquez, who, speaking of analytics on YouTube, according to my analytics, I think he's commented the most in the last year on my channel. And most of the things he says, he really likes what I have to say. But in this case, he did not like what I had to say based on what I said about Trump. So he said, what's going on with Maitreya? I don't care about your views on politics. It's all corrupted and is being used by the dark forces to achieve their ends in destroying the Western world. It's the sort of cleavage that is dividing people. The choice is being clearly made for us to make. Stick to the information on the emergence, not politics. All right, in my opinion, it's the left that effed everything up, and it's President Trump that's leading us out of the BS and corruption. Okay, well, first and foremost, I'm sorry to say this to you, Robert, because I consider you a friend, but I'm going to continue to talk about politics because it's important. And I do remember, and I don't know if you were around at the time, but some years ago when the Bush administration was in power and Ben's master was talking about what they were doing and what influence they were under with the influence of the forces of darkness and so forth, Ben was very outspoken opponent of the Bush administration. And there were a lot of people in Share International that wanted him to stop talking about it. They said, begged him, please do not talk about this anymore. For one, they were afraid, and there were some people, and I know them by name, they were afraid that the government was going to take it out on them. Which Ben said, there's no reason to be concerned about that. They're not going to worry about it. He said, don't worry about that, which they never did. And then he also said, you really can't take politics out of the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom and vice versa. It would be the same thing of talking about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom and not talk about the economic disparities between rich nations and poor nations, to talk about the environment, to talk about hunger and the end hunger and so forth. You can't talk about the emergence without that. Just the same thing as you can't talk about this, what's the corruption in politics. You can't, right? So that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. But I've always listed it out. I always have. Go back and listen to the last video even. I've expressed my opposition to the Democratic Party too, But people are under the false assumption that Donald Trump is the white knight out there that's going to solve all the problems in the world. He even says it. I alone can fix it. Maitreya has never said that. He's always said that we have to fix it. So what's the difference, right? And so what I was saying in the last comment about some of the pundits that I'm listening to where they're not giving the solutions and blah, 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 you could say the same thing about the politicians out there. You could say the same things about Trump. So you think he is here to solve the problems, and you clearly have an understanding of Maitreya based on your previous comments. How or what has Trump said or done or promised even that is anywhere in line with any of Maitreya's priorities? The environment, right? Huge priority for Maitreya that we should, for humanity, based on what Maitreya is saying. What has Trump done for the environment? Nothing. In fact, he's actually taking regulations and getting rid of regulations so it make it easier for corporations to pollute the environment so they can make more profit. And he said that. Drill, baby, drill. That was the other one he said, right? Getting rid of the EV mandates and so forth, which were put in there to help curb greenhouse gas emissions. He's talking about putting in more nuclear power plants, which is, the masters would say, is the worst possible thing that we could be doing right at this moment, because that causes, radiation and the invisible peril. Healthcare, right? He's trying to get rid of what limited healthcare we have in this country. He's trying to make it more, he's trying to limit regulations so that insurance companies and hospitals can charge more. Same thing with medications and so forth. He's trying to get rid of what Biden even did which was one of the things that he did which was good, was put caps on Medicare drug prices and so forth. Trying to get rid of that. Feeding the poor, right, is a huge priority of Maitreya. What has Trump done to feed the poor other than try to take away SNAP benefits for the poor? He talks about peace, but he's talking about peace in reference to doing exactly what we've done and tried and failed in the past, which is more war, which is more regime change, which is, threatening everything. One of the other priorities of Maitreya, which won't happen until long after the principle of sharing starts, but we'll eventually not even have to use passports. We can go anywhere in the world without having to go through customs because we will trust each other that much. And yet, has he done anything to bring that about? Has he brought about trust amongst the nations at all? No, he's creating more distrust amongst the nations by putting tariffs on our allies and so forth. So I can't see anything that he's done or said that is anything to do with the priorities of Maitreya. Just as when I hear pundits in the world or politicians, I'm listening to see if they're saying anything that is remotely even close to any of the priorities of the teacher or a solution to one of those or any of those. And I'm not hearing much. So that would be, to me, the litmus test of whether they are inspired by a master, inspired by Maitreya, working towards, bringing about anything that is concerning to Maitreya about the world or whatever. But I can't see, or I've never heard anything that Trump has said. I've heard the exact opposite, actually. So that's why I say what I say. So if you don't like it, I'm sorry. If you don't like it, really you don't have to listen to me talk about politics. Just turn it off if you haven't already. I love you guys. Thank you very much for the comments and the questions, and I look forward to talking to you again in the very near future. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.